One question I get frequently asked is if I'm going to marry my girlfriend. We've been together for over 10 years. We own a home. We have two beautiful daughters. And I get that question a lot. Why aren't you married, Matt? Why haven't you married this woman? The truth of the matter is, marriage itself doesn't interest me. It just never really has. Not to say that I don't love her or our life or our children. I just don't like the idea of being married. It doesn't just suit me as a person. So when I come across a story like this, why I married an anime character, I'm immediately drawn to the story because you can kind of see it happening. I mean, you're not shocked by it. I'm not shocked by it, but I still want to know more. And that's exactly what we're going to find out today. So, according to this BBC article, they have to start you off with a definition. There's a word in Japanese for people who are obsessed with video games and anime, otaku. An increasing number of otaku now say they've fallen in love with anime characters and given up on the idea of real world romance. And there's actually a scariness factor to that. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit weird. Not that I'm against anyone falling in love with an anime character. I think with all of my experiences on Twitter and dealing with weebs in general, I get it. I do. I understand. But this is a Hiko Kondo, and he wakes up every day to the sound of his wife's voice. She calls him from across the room in her high-pitched, girlish, sing-song voice. She dances and swirls around, urging him to get out of bed. At the same time, he's holding her in his arms on the bottom tier of their metal-framed bunk bed. And if he was more awake, he would be watching an illustrated cartoon of her singing on YouTube. This is because Akihiko's wife is an idea, an anime character named Miku. Yeah, and his wife is an anime character named Miku. And he loves her. And you know what? More power to him. I don't want to make fun of this guy. I really don't, but definitely more power to him. She's a hologram that lives in a glass capsule on the shelf in the corner of the room, and the cuddly toy with its big soft head and small body that he holds close at night. But she can also take innumerable other forms. And I'm not gonna lie, this part's kind of creepy to me. Each representation includes some essential characteristics, Akihiko says, including bright turquoise colored hair, tied up in two long bunches, with a thick fringe framing her face. But beyond that, Miku varies. She may be childish, cartoon-like creature, or she may be more human and sexier, with a low neckline and big boobs, schoolgirl blouse, and short skirt. Akihiko considers all of these Mikus to be his wife. Well, I mean, to be fair, what kind of relationship would you have if you didn't spice it up in that department a little bit, you know? If you didn't sit there at some point and really spice it up by having yourself like some kind of adventurous lifestyle. But this is Akihiko's life. This is his life. This is his apartment in Japan. He has got the metal bunk bed. He's got her and that little holograph thing in the corner. And then, of course, his plushie that he cuddles up with to go to sleep. And I think the craziest thing about this is that he's not in any way, in any form, in any way, shape, embarrassed at all, period. And there's something about that is just magnificently fascinating. Now, the couple did get married, and they had a ceremony that Akihiko regards as a wedding in November of last year. It wasn't official, obviously, but it was a pretty big bash with 39 guests. The number spells her name in Japanese, the 3 for me and the 9 for Ku. So it was an elaborate, thought out wedding. Very romantic. And 39 people actually showed up to it, which is remarkable. Miku was a present in the form of a cuddly toy wearing a white lace dress and a long veil, her outfit handmade by a designer who contacted him after he announced his engagement. Okay, good to know there's a cottage industry out there for lace dresses, long veils, and wedding outfits for toys. But Akihiko himself wore a pure white coat and tails with white flowers in his lapel, his usual square-framed glasses with a big grin. He held her in her bouquet, one of her trademarks, a bunch of leeks tied with a big pink bow. He said their vows and walked down the aisle, holding her by his side as guests smiled and clapped. Later, they sat at the top table for dinner, Akihiko in one white chair and Miku in another, propped up in an empty flower vase. So they at least had a he put thought into this. I mean, I kind of want to like just, poke a little bit of fun, to be fair. And I think that's warranted, and I think he gets that. But at the same time, like, he put more effort into this than personal friends of mine who have gotten married have put into theirs. So there's a hopeless romantic in Akihiko, and unfortunately, an inanimate object that also doubles as a hologram is the one who got it. And that's sad, actually. That's pretty sad. And not like in a weepy, pathetic sort of way, but just in like some girl missed out on this. Some girl really did miss out. And that's the unfortunate thing. Because not only that, but his mother and sister didn't attend. And the weirder thing is that the company behind this Gatebox, the company that made Akihiko's hologram of Miku, started issuing unofficial marriage licenses to customers. And they say 3,700 people have taken them up on their offer. 3,700 people have taken them up on the offer to get fake marriage certificates in order to really live that otaku life. Okay. Now, Akihiko never really entertained the idea of having a real life girlfriend. He says that he never felt attracted to real women. He says because he's not popular among women. And that is a common trait. Some might argue, oh, he's just a Japanese version of an incel. To be fair, he's actually what's known as a Herbivore Man. We here in the States would call that a Neet. And there's a large number of them in Japan, and there's a growing number of them here in America, it feels like. Except Akihiko here, in my opinion, decided to go off and meet an online, well, not really online, but a hologram, instead of, channeling his anger and rage into incel pickup forums. Because we know how bad that can go down the road. Now, in school, he was bullied for being an otaku, and bullying actually followed him into the world of work. He was working as an administrator in a primary school about 12 years ago when he was picked upon incessantly by two women. One was close to his age and one was a lot older. When he greeted them in the morning, they would ignore him. They would stand in the kitchen where he could hear them, and they would call him names. And if he made a small mistake, they would shout at him, sometimes in front of the young students, which he found humiliating. The bullying also got so intolerable that he left work. For almost 2 years, he locked himself in a room and refused to leave. And that's sad, man. That is actually 100% sad. So it's like, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, wow, this guy like married, a hologram, married a toy, married this idea. But this idea is something that won't treat him how he's been treated his entire life. And there's a bit of a romantic nature to that. There's something sweet about that. In essence of saying this guy completely fell in love with an inanimate object because the thought of being with real women who have treated him like crap his entire life was too painful to bear. Too painful to bear. That is what this guy's life was like. And I can't help but just really feel bad for him. He goes on to say, I was hikikomori, which is a well-known phenomenon in Japan and South Korea where young people, mostly men, become hermits in their own parental homes, refusing to go outside or even speak to families. There are estimated to be about 1 million of them, and it can go on for many years. Again, the Herbivore Man is what they were called for a while. But then he met Miku, saying he was watching her video on YouTube and looking at her images and listening to her songs, and he was healed by her. And that's the interesting thing when you look at the concept of, let's say, like love and attraction. People find connections with things. When I say that Miku is an inanimate object, I guess that isn't necessarily the most truthful thing on the planet. That's not really the most truthful thing out there, mostly because someone created her, someone drew her, someone animated her, someone provided the voice. And that in and of itself, that kind of Frankenstein of parts, that amalgamation of an entity is ultimately what he fell in love with. But also, you could tell there's a lot of emotional trauma there. Because it says here that the constant bullying he felt had forced him to shut down, to retreat into a state where he was emotionally void, where he was deeply and darkly depressed. Saying listening to her songs sometimes made me feel very emotional. How she dances, moves, and talks makes me feel. My heart started moving again. That's why I love her and why she's so important to me. He started to feel like he was in a relationship with her. And with the support of that relationship, he was able to go back to work. So she's like a sympathy. I don't want to say a sympathy pet. I don't want to say that at all, but she's like a sympathy entity, a sympathy object, a sympathy thing that he was able to more or less use as a crutch to come back into the real world, to bring himself back into it. But the great thing about this guy, Akihiko, is that he is absolutely aware of everything and he's conscious of it. And that's what makes it more fascinating. It says here that he's well aware that many people think that his marriage is strange. The one disappointment about his wedding was that his mother and sister refused to attend, and he gets a lot of abuse from people online, especially after going public with his marriage in several interviews. But he's also received a huge number of messages of support from strangers. He says a number of people kind of came out. They wrote to him to tell him about their own affection for anime characters, saying, I received so many that are like that, so I thought it was worthwhile. And the truth of the matter is, I think there's a lot of people out there who really do love anime characters. And I think the anime community has an, I don't want to say an issue with that, but I think people out there who might have an issue with some otakus or weebs falling for these characters or becoming obsessed with these characters, looking at it through the lens of Akihiko here and what he's experienced over his life, at least through this article, getting a general idea, you can kind of see it. The concept of a herbivore man or Neets isn't really lost on anyone. But this is what happens when he focuses that healing process on something that's inanimate and ends up in his mind making her real. Almost like a weird science situation, just without Kelly the Brock and being real and boobs. But here's where he's at now. He works in a secondary school where he's open about his relationship status. Some of the staff find it weird, but he says the students tend to be more accepting. He's working and socializing again and has his own apartment, 2 tidy rooms in a quiet suburb with his name and Miku's name written above the doorbell. And most importantly, he's happy. This is a shot of him asleep with her right next to him holding her foot. He looks peaceful. He looks calm. He looks comforted. This is what Miku has brought to him. And, I can't really make fun of that because it's not something to ultimately make fun of. This is a guy who was seeking acceptance, seeking love, seeking peace and happiness. And he found it in an anime character. And through having no shame and not trying to run away from anything and absolutely positively coming out and saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, people have accepted him for it. They're tolerant of him. The students are tolerant of him. The staff, maybe not so much, but the students are. And that's showing you really kind of where the younger generation is. So all I can really say at the end here is that I really hope he finds somebody down the road. I do. I hope that this particular exposure doesn't impact him mentally. He doesn't get a lot of crap, and that he finds happiness with a real person down the road, if at all. And if he's just content where he is, then honestly, who the hell are we to tell him anything different, right? So I leave it to you, your thoughts, your opinions. How do you feel about this? Would you ever marry an anime character or engage in any kind of relationship with an anime character and then their inanimate counterpart? I'm very curious to know your thoughts on this one. Let me know down in the comments. And if you guys want to help out and support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to click on the join button, join the channel. YouTube has been demonetizing practically every video I make. So if you want to help out, that's quite frankly the best way to do it. And I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later. Have yourself a great day and peace out.